Hey, welcome to the Lovecraft Easing podcast. This is October the 21st, 2018. Can't believe it's 2018. I can't believe it when I say that out loud. 2 more years and my son will be an adult. Jeez, I feel old.
Anyway, just because your son gets to be a certain age does not make him an adult, as I well know.
Yeah, that's true. Matt Ruff, the author of Lovecraft Country and other books, is our guest today. Hey, Matt.
Hello.
How you doing?
Having me on.
Well, let's do short introductions of those panelists who showed up. I'm looking at you, Pete Rollick. And then we'll talk to Matt. Kelly, why don't we start with you?
I'm Kelly Young. I am the executive editor of Strange Eons magazine.
And
the Dead Again podcast. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Where they endlessly discuss the movie Dead Again.
Right, just over and over. We're up to episode 16, and it's getting a little tiring, but we really love that movie Dead Again.
What do you really talk about? What was your latest episode?
Latest episode was the film Trick or Treat, the 1986 heavy metal classic. I use that word lightly, obviously. And then we talk, we also just genre discussion of television, books, shit like that.
For a second, I thought you were talking about Trick or Treat, the recent one. That's a pretty awesome Halloween film to watch.
That's a fun one, but I think everybody knows about that. We often are bringing up stuff that you don't know about.
Okay. Matthew.
Hi, I'm Matt Carpenter. I edit books for Olthar Press sometimes, and our latest one was Pickman's Gallery.
Okay, Rick.
Rick Lay, writer.
I'm Mike Davis, Lovecraft Easing guy. I'm not sure what it is I do, but
you do it damn well.
Thank you. It's almost Halloween, and I'm really in the mood this year. And I'm really looking forward to next Sunday, October the 28th, because it'll be me, Jeff Thomas, and Scott Thomas. I won't have to talk to Kelly, so that's a plus.
Get to is what you meant to say.
Anyway, we do this for those listening for the first time or new listeners this year. We do this Halloween show every year, and it's a lot of fun. I talked to Jeff Thomas and Scott Thomas because they're into Halloween just as much as I am, and they've got all sorts of Halloween traditions, and we talk about spooky things that have happened to us that we can't explain. It's a really fun show, and it'll get you in the mood for Halloween pretty well, I think. So that's next week, and it'll be on, for those who listen on the go with just audio, it'll be available October 29th. So it'll be available to you in time for Halloween. So, okay, let's talk to Matt Ruff. Matt Ruff is the author of Lovecraft Country, as I said, and other books. Matt, for those who don't know you or have not yet heard of you, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I basically have been writing for 30 years now. I had a really weird career. I basically decided I wanted to write novels for a living when I was about 5 years old, and I spent my childhood teaching myself how to do that, and went to Cornell, studied creative writing, which is a horribly impractical major for someone who doesn't want to teach, because that's really the only fallback position if for some reason the novel writing gig doesn't work out. But my senior thesis in honors English at Cornell was my first novel, Fool on the Hill. And one of my professors, Alison Lurie, was kind enough to introduce me to her agent, Melanie Jackson, who sold Fool on the Hill the October after I graduated. So I got published right out of college, and I've basically just been writing novels ever since. And I survived early on because I had some foreign sales. My books actually sold better in Germany for many years than they did here, and also because when I was young, I didn't mind being poor. And then slowly over time, I built up enough of a backlist and enough of a good reputation that I've been able to keep making a go at it. And now with Lovecraft Country, it's going to be made into an HBO series. So I kind of finally got the golden ticket. So
So you are no longer poor, in other words.
Yeah, I'll be able to afford health insurance for at least a couple more years, which is nice. So,
Well, I'm curious then. Have you ever had to hold down a job since college, or just purely writing full time?
Hold down a job?
my last real job was I waited tables at a bookstore owned by a lesbian collective in Hartford, Connecticut. It was a bookstore cafe, and I worked the cafe. I was a terrible waiter because I don't actually like interacting. But I'm not a very social person generally, so I was the annoying waiter. But that was only for a few months, and then I found out Full in the Hill was going to get published, and I got my royalty check, and I gave my 2 weeks notice, and then yeah, and since then it's always either been I've somehow some weird windfall or twist of luck has always saved me right before I was about to fall into having to actually work for a living. So yeah. But I always warn people, don't try this at home. If you're actually planning to make a go as a novelist, you should definitely have a backup career plan, preferably one that leaves you a lot of free time and a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I've been self-employed for a long time too. I think my last job was real estate before I got sick, but that was self-employed too, I guess. It reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever read the Travis McGee series.
I think I read a couple of them when I was younger, mostly because Stephen King was a fan.
Yeah, John D. McDonald. The Travis McGee character tells people that he takes his retirement in chunks. So instead of waiting until he's 65.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works, and so there's still. I mean, that's the thing is there's never unless you really get rich, you're never completely safe. So it's entirely possible I will end my days in an old folks home somewhere impoverished and not knowing my own name. But so far, I'm doing all right.
And the other thing I was going to say is you're not social, and we're here forcing you to be social today. So
this is low stress though. So
Matt, I think you Matt Carpenter. Sorry, we got two Matts here today. I think you have some questions, right?
I read this book when it first came out, and I have some questions I'd like to ask you about it. And this can be kind of rambling, so go wherever you want with it. But first of all,
we're used to it.
I wanted to know what the genesis of the book was. What was the germ of the idea that pricked you, that led you in this direction?
So about, I guess it was 11 years ago, 2007, I had a meeting with some people from Fox, I think it was Fox TV Studios, who were fans of my novel Bad Monkeys, and they wanted me to pitch them original TV series ideas. And they ended up rejecting all of them, but it was a good exercise anyway, and that it got me to come up with some interesting ideas that I could then develop as novels because they were a little too wild for television. But one of the things I wanted to do was a kind of an X-Files show with a recurring cast of characters having weekly paranormal adventures. Only instead of being like white FBI agents, it was going to be this black family who owned a travel agency in Chicago in the 1950s and who published a travel guide called the Safe Negro Travel Guide that sort of told black motorists where they could safely stop to sleep or get food while traveling across the country. And this was based on actual travel guides that existed at that time for African Americans. The most famous
I remember reading about those. Yeah,
I learned that from your book, and I looked it up, did some research on it from your link on your site, and it just blew me away.
Yeah, I heard about it through there's a book called Sundown Towns by James W. Lowen, and
he's the guy who wrote Lies My Teacher Told Me.
Yeah, and this book is about the sort of the secret history of whites only communities in America, and he sort of mentions the Green Book in passing as one of the ways that African Americans sort of adapted to life in a really hostile Jim Crow era. And I was just sort of fascinated by that because it's sort of the tip of the iceberg of other survival strategies that black folks had to come up with before the Civil Rights Act passed. So I thought that would be kind of a cool thing to make my Fox Mulder character a sort of field researcher for one of these guides. And so every week he'd be driving around America, looking for places that would take him in. But he was also going to be a nerd, a science fiction and fantasy and weird tales fan, and someone who loved the genre, even though the genre didn't necessarily love him back. So he'd be the kind of guy where, if he saw a werewolf or a Bigfoot or a flying saucer, he would know what the rules were and kind of how to deal with that, and would be interested as well as unnerved by it. But at the same time, he'd be dealing with just the terrors of life in the segregated America. And that was kind of how Lovecraft came into it, because I needed a thematic bridge between paranormal horror and white supremacy, and of course Lovecraft is both. He's he's the classic cosmic horror guy, but he was also really, really racist. And so Lovecraft Country became sort of the code for that, for both of those things. And as I say, I pitched this as a TV show, and it was just a little too out there, I guess, in 2007. I was a little ahead of the curve on that, but the idea stayed with me, and I spent another 5 years figuring out how to make it work as a novel, and wrote it and finished it in, I guess I must have finished it in 2015. It was published in 2016, and for once my timing was perfect. Somebody sent a copy to Jordan Peele. And this was while he was still, Get Out had not happened yet, but he was working on it, but it hadn't been released yet. But he read Lovecraft Country, and it was basically right on the same wavelength of what he wanted to do. And so he got in touch with my CAA agent, and I had a really amazing phone call with him and Misha Green, who's the creator of Underground, which is it's sort of like The Great Escape set on a slave plantation. So that's a great TV series. And so I talked to them, and it was just great to finally talk to a couple of people on TV who got what I wanted to do, and we were all sort of on the same page. And J.J. Abrams was involved as well, and so they were all excited about this, and they optioned the book. And then Get Out came out and was very successful, obviously, and that kind of greased the skids for HBO to take the series. So anyway, that's sort of how this all happened.
I'll bet that was an amazing phone call, amazing day for you.
Well, it was funny because, yeah, I again, this was before Get Out had been released, and they hadn't even shown the trailers yet. So my agent, when he called me, was like he was a little puzzled. He was like, yeah, Jordan Peele is mostly known for comedy, but apparently he's thinking about getting into horror, and he wants to talk to you about this. And I'm like, sure, that's fine. And then when I finally saw the first trailer for Get Out, I'm like, oh, okay, of course. This is why he's interested, because we're definitely thinking about the same stuff. So yeah, so it was nice after all that time to finally find somebody who was willing to go ahead with it.
Well, for the listeners, if you're interested in reading about the real Safe Negro Travel Guide, which was called the Negro Motorist Green Book, if I have that right.
Yeah.
Here's a heartbreaking quote. I'm on Matt Ruff's website, by the way, right now, reading this, bymattruff.com, and you can also search for the Safe Negro Travel Guide. But here's the heartbreaking quote from the introduction that Matt quoted on his site. There will be a day sometime in the near future when this guide will not have to be published. That is when we as a race will have equal rights and privileges in the United States. Introduction to the 1936 edition. So, yeah. Can you just briefly explain what it was? I mean, it basically was telling African Americans which hotels would take them in, which restaurants, that kind of thing, right?
I mean, yeah, the book, it's basically a catalog organized by state of hotels and restaurants and other facilities that are willing to take Black customers. And a thing that a lot of people get confused about, even when they've read the book, is a lot of people assume that this was mainly something you would need when traveling in the southern U.S., because a lot of people think that that's where all the racism was. And in fact, the South was the place where you almost didn't need the Green Book, because the South openly embraced its racism. So there were signs telling you, unless a sign specifically said colored, you knew you were not welcome. Where things got tricky was in the North and the West, where things were just as segregated as in the South and often just as violent, but people were a little less open about, they were a little more cagey about what, so there were still signs sometimes, but a lot of times you had to play a guessing game where you'd stop in a motel and they wouldn't tell you we don't rent to black folks. They would tell you, oh, sorry, we just rented the last room. And then you go to the next motel down and they'll tell you the same thing. And there are stories about this. People could go to, half a dozen different places, get the same story everywhere. And so in addition to being discriminated against, you sort of get this gaslighting effect where they're not telling you what they're doing to you. And of course, there's always this thing, if you try to press the issue, it can turn violent in a heartbeat. And if it does, nobody's going to take your side. So what these guidebooks were basically for, particularly if you were traveling cross country in the North or the West, they sort of, you could plan it out. So, okay, we're going to travel through here, this city. So here's like 3 hotels it'll take us, or, here we go to Seattle, here's 7. And if you looked up the addresses on a lot of these places, they tended to be concentrated in the black neighborhoods, obviously. And another interesting thing I found when I was doing my research, in a lot of cases, if you look up the addresses now, the addresses don't exist anymore, because you will find a super highway going through that area. Because when the interstate highway system was built, a lot of times what the planners would do is they'd eliminate the black neighborhoods entirely by running the highway through that. So a lot of the places that you used to have these hotels, the addresses are gone now because it's just a highway underpass. So it's this very weird part of, and largely forgotten part of history. And I mean, it's obviously coming up a lot now online. People are talking about it again. But there was this period when there were all of these survival tools that African Americans had come up with because the long-term goal was full equality, obviously, but in the meantime, they had to figure out a way to just make it through each day. And so they had the things like this guidebook, and they had, there was like a parallel universe of professional organizations because, for example, you couldn't become a realtor if you were black because the Realtors Association was whites only also. So they had the Realtists, which was the black real estate dealers, and you have the white Freemasons, and then you have the Prince Hall Freemasons, who are the black Freemasons, and so forth. And so that was just all of this I sort of found out about and sort of folded it into the story that at the same time has also got ghosts and witches and sorcerers and things that go bump in the night. And so part of what the story is about is which is scarier and worse and more threatening to your sanity, the thing under the bed or the cop who pulls you over on a lonely highway just before sunset. So
now, I understand you had an experience in college that may have influenced this idea too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that probably the moment of inspiration for Lovecraft Country may have been. I was friends with a guy named Joe Scantlebury, who was the resident hall director of Ujima, which was it was a dorm on campus associated with the Africana Studies program. So it was the black dorm at Cornell, and so I would drop by and visit Joe Scantlebury from time to time, and he was the kind of guy who would just like to drop truth bombs on well-meaning white boys. And so one of the things I would do while I was at Cornell, I like to go, then as now, I like to go for these long, epic walks, 5-10 miles, where I would like talk to myself and work on story ideas. And Cornell, Ithaca is like a little cosmopolitan island surrounded by rural farmland. So you pick, at least back in those days, you pick a direction, walk 5 miles, and you're in the boondocks. So I would just wander off, get lost in the backcountry, and eventually circle back to campus. And one day I was talking to Joe about this and was recommending that he try hiking the backcountry too. And he started laughing at me and he said, "Matt, I'm black. I can't go walking around the farmland up here." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? We're in the North." And he's like, "Yes, we're in the North, but it doesn't make a difference. I'm black. And I would like to live to see graduation." And I thought about it some more, and I realized, yeah, that when I would go walking, the kinds of folks I would encounter would typically be people who kept dogs and had, rifles on gun racks in their pickup trucks, and they never hassled me even when my hair was long. But if I had looked like Joe, I might have gotten a very different reception. And the thing about it was, if you got in trouble out in the back roads there, you could very easily have disappeared. And so I just remember thinking about that and having this moment where I kind of realized that, in a sense, Joe and I we were sharing the same geography, but kind of living in two entirely different countries. And that kind of stuck with me. And as did some other things that Joe said, and it was also through Joe that I ended up meeting Professor James Turner at the Africana Study Center and studying with him for a couple of classes. And he also said some things that stuck with me. And, I thought about that stuff for many years, and it kind of all came out finally when I wrote Lovecraft Country.
Okay, now, that's the real historical backdrop, history mood you're trying to create. Let's go over to the Lovecraft part of it. What has been your experience with Lovecraft? Did you read his works, or what did you do?
Yeah, so of course I'm a nerd from way back. So it's funny, Lovecraft is one of those authors, Philip K. Dick is another, who initially I didn't like him as much as his imitators. And in Lovecraft's case, it was just the language and some of the pacing and stuff. He just kind of bored me. And I think I preferred the more modern takes on Lovecraft, or modern-ish, because this would have been the 70s and the 80s. And then, as I got older and I went back to him, I started appreciating him more on his own terms. And obviously, yes, there is this issue where Lovecraft is very racist and makes no bones about it. And but the thing I find is that it's a distraction, but it also does he manages to tap into this more universal sense of dread while he's sort of giving vent to his very specific racist feelings. That, so even if you don't share his worldview, his sense of dread still kind of works. And I get a lot out of that.
Plus cool monsters.
Plus cool monsters, exactly. So, he's a difficult author, but I'm less offended by him than just annoyed that he had this horrible blind spot getting in the way in many cases of his storytelling. And it's just, I find myself saying, geez, just stop embarrassing yourself and sort of focus on the stuff that really works here. And if only he could have opened his mind a bit, he could have been even better than he was. But that sense of dread he tapped into obviously had quite an effect on people and has still lasted. And I think is that, and the fact that he encouraged other people to share his milieu and build on it, sort of has granted him a kind of immortality. And I know there are a lot of readers who are very, very offended by him, who kind of wish he would just disappear from the culture. And I just don't think that's going to happen. I think he's with us, warts and all, pretty much to stay. But now there will be more people, I think, writing more open-minded takes, taking the good from Lovecraft and jettisoning the bad.
So, okay, all this came together. Were you surprised at the success of the book? Or was this your most successful book, or have you had other successes?
Right. I mean, I think this because now with the HBO series, this is by far my most successful. Before that, my commercially most successful book was probably Bad Monkeys. And my critically most successful book was my third novel, Set This House in Order, which is a story about two people with multiple personality disorder who become friends. And that one, it didn't sell very well, but it certainly seemed to impress a lot of critics. And for some people, it's going to be my favorite, the favorite thing of mine that I ever written. But no, this is going to be, I think, far and away my most commercially successful work. And I think that's a number of different factors. I think for once my timing was right, and I tapped into a lot of things that are popular right now. Just the idea of, I don't really think of it this way, but the sort of idea of socially conscious horror. With me, it's less about pushing any sort of social message as just, I think fiction is more interesting when you don't leave when you include as many options as possible, when you include as many people as possible. And so books where all of the characters are white men or all of the characters are from one social group, that's just leaving a lot of possibilities, on the table unexamined. And I find that, diversity, quote unquote, just makes for a much better, richer fiction. The more stuff you can include, the more options you have, the more perspectives and worldviews you can incorporate. And it also just makes it a lot more fun for me as a writer to sort of challenge myself and be able to, see the world from a bunch of different perspectives. So, and I think that kind of thing happens to just be very popular right now.
So walk us through this then. You had mentioned something about it. So you write the book, and then how in the world it came to HBO's attention? And tell us how that worked.
I'm actually not sure how Jordan Peele got a copy of the book, but so it was. I sold it to HarperCollins, has been my publisher for my last 4 novels, and unlike the TV folks, they were very bullish on this idea from the start. So, so I wrote the novel. They loved it. They are behind it, and I just had very good agents. So I sent it to my CAA guy, and he sent it around to various people, and it was interesting. Almost immediately, I knew my timing was right because we were getting a lot of interest from. So Jordan Peele is the guy who ended up optioning it, him and J.J. Abrams, but there were a number of different parties who also wanted to talk to me about it, and this was almost out. So I knew I had done something right, and basically, it's just having the phone with different people, and then you just decide who you want to work with and who's making the best offer. It was just after I talked to Jordan and Nisha, it was pretty much a done deal because they got what I was trying to do. They were on the same page. And one of the experiences when when you are talking to Hollywood people, occasionally it's almost as if you're talking about a different book than the one you wrote. So which isn't necessarily bad. Adaptations can be interesting, but in this case, it was like, we all had the same story in mind. We were all excited about it for the same reasons, and it was just a great fit, right? And from there, it was like they optioned it, and then I think the way HBO, because Get Out was released and was the biggest thing.
Oh man!
Uh-oh. That's not good.
Shoot.
Yeah, we lost Matt Ruff. I'm sure he'll come back. I noticed he was freezing up a little bit, so.
I wanted to talk to him more about the involvement in the series and the casting and stuff. Rat.
I'm sure he'll be back. And Pete joined us finally. Hey, Pete.
Hey, yeah, I'm sorry, guys.
It's fine. Hey, by the way, for all the critics, this is a live show, so things do happen. It's not always perfect. So. We can. I want to ask him too, and there's someone in the audience wanted to ask him. Yeah, there he is.
Hey guys, sorry about that.
Hey, no problem. You may want to turn off your video, Matt. You were freezing up just a bit before you got kicked off.
Okay, sure.
If you don't mind.
No, I don't.
Can I jump in just for a second, Matt Carter?
Sure.
I want to ask, and one of the live people watching wanted to ask your take on the Ballad of Black Tom. By the way, on December 9th, Victor Lavelle will be our guest.
Oh, excellent.
As well. So I think I read somewhere that they were published on the same day. Is that?
Yeah, that was an interesting thing. As Lovecraft Country was inching towards publication, I started hearing rumors about this other book, The Ballad of Black Tom, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. That sounds kind of like what I was doing. And they dropped on the exact same day. And Victor and I have since met and become friends. And it was we met up in San Francisco, and we were having a conversation about it. And he said to me, he was really glad that they dropped on the same day, so there was never any question about whether one was borrowing from the other. It was just this happy coincidence. And I love Ballad of Black Tom. He's doing a more traditional Lovecraft thing. I mean, his is, whereas mine is sort of, Lovecraft came in the back door as sort of a thematic unification kind of deal. Victor specifically set out to take one of Lovecraft's most racist stories, the horror at Red Hook, and retell it from the point of view of one of these sort of, nameless black characters in the background. And so that's much more of a sort of a direct engagement with Lovecraft than I think than what I was doing. And so if you are actually looking for a heavy-duty Lovecraftian tale, that may be more to your initial taste, I think. I mean, I think both books, work for most people, but if you really want someone talking directly to Lovecraft, that's probably the way to go.
Okay.
But yeah, that was such a nice coincidence that happened and that I got to meet him.
So let's talk a little bit more about the show. Now that you've optioned it, are you having any say on the screenplay? I've heard different takes from different authors, or is it like they've got the property now and they're going to run with it?
My official title, I'm a consulting producer, I think is what it's called, and basically that means that if they have anything they want to bounce off me, if they have any questions for me, if they need any of my research, they can give me a call, but it's basically up to them what my involvement is going to be. And so far, I had some conversations with Misha Green at the start of the process, and I sent her a bunch of stuff and notes that I had. And for now, they're pretty much doing their own thing, which is fine. I think it's in good hands, and I'm kind of excited to see the changes she's going to ring on it. So and the thing is, I've got my own stories to tell. I've got other things I wanna write. So it's kind of good that they're doing. I did my heavy lifting, and now they're doing their heavy lifting, and we'll see going forward if it goes for. I think it's going to be successful. I think it's going to have many more seasons, and when it comes to planning where the show will go, I may have more of a direct role at that point. But it's really up to them, and we'll see how that goes.
So
Jordan,
it's a show then? I mean, like a mini series, as it were.
Yeah, it's going to be. I think the first season is going to be 10 episodes, and I gather it's going to track fairly closely to the book with some. I mean, there are some significant changes from what I know. I can't really talk too much about it because I'm not sure what is and is not public knowledge yet, but. But it will certainly be recognizable to people who read the book, and then where it goes from there is yet to be determined. But so yeah, it's going to be a 10-episode mini series, I guess, is one way to think of it. But hopefully, just the first season of many
on HBO.
Yeah.
Jordan Peele is one of the producers, right? So is he directing, or do you know who is directing?
The pilot is directed by Jan de Mange. Gosh, what else has he done? He did a he's probably best known for your fans for I'm blanking on the title, but it was a British miniseries about zombies invading the Big Brother house. It's like Dead Set, I think, or something like that.
That's exactly what it was called, Dead Set.
Yeah, and he's also got White Boy Rick coming out, I guess, later this year. And so he directed the pilot, and I don't know who's directing the other episodes. He may be back to do the rest, but I don't know if that's been decided yet or announced.
Has the air date been announced?
No, that's still waiting to hear that too. So.
Okay. Matt Carpenter, do you have more questions, or anybody else?
Yeah, I do. I do. So what's next for Lovecraft Country World? I mean, this story went to its completion. I know you've you've written a book series that was like a trilogy, so I know you're not the kind of person who goes to a completely different setting all the time. Are you going to visit these characters again?
Well, the trilogy you're talking about, that was kind of a joke. That's one book with 3 parts.
I see.
No, people always think, no, that was Sewer, Gas, and Electric, my second novel. And I subtitled the Public Works trilogy. No, that was sort of that book was I was on a day when I was supposed to be working on my first novel, I was futzing around with what would be the weirdest name for a trilogy that might conceivably be a good story. And so I came up with the idea of doing one where each book was a different public utility, but it's just one novel. So no, actually, generally my books are all different. So it would be unusual for me to go back. But having just said all that, yeah, I'm thinking about returning to Lovecraft Country and doing more. The main issue is going to be that the novel was designed to be a standalone. It feels a little open-ended because these are Black folks living in America, so it had to be kind of open-ended. I couldn't just have them live happily ever after, because they've still got they're gonna wake up after the last chapter, and they're still gonna deal in with the rest of the 1950s. So. But if I do go back to the story, I would feel the need to sort of carry it forward and bring it to a more definite conclusion. And that suggests a series of not just one more book, but 2 or 3 more books. And I write really slowly. So I have to decide whether I really want to spend 5 or 6 or 10 years finishing this thing, or if my time is better spent working on entirely new ideas. But there's a part of me that I think I really do want to go back and do more with them. So I'll have to make that decision sometime in the next year or so. And as soon as I do, I'll post on my website about it. But at the moment, I'm working on a novel that's completely different. So, and that's due in 2 more months.
So many people a lot of Americans, I think, look back at the 1950s as this wonderful kind of golden time. But the people who do that are Caucasian, typically.
Yeah.
Well, let's not forget that women couldn't get a credit card or own a house.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, it is a very male and white centric time of the country.
Yeah, if you're a white male and not accused of being a communist by what's his name, you were probably okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and a lot of that, of course, a lot of that Golden Age stuff too is people just, people in the public eye looking back at their own childhoods. I mean, it's easy to be, if you had a decent childhood, of course you're gonna tend to project that onto the world without realizing that not everybody had the life you did. So, and if most of the people talking are white guys, then yeah, you're gonna get a somewhat skewed picture of what it was like for everybody. So.
Yeah, you were talking about how at the end of Lovecraft Country, and you're thinking about what you do next. The fundamental problem is that you've defeated the cosmic evil, but that sort of banal evil, that everyday racism and everyday imminent threat, is right there.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is it's not, it would just be a false feeling, I think, to wrap it up neatly and pretend that that's going away. I mean, obviously that's the thing, is that it's the book is not about, we've defeated everything. It's about showing you that these are folks who know how to survive and get through a tough time, and tomorrow they're going to get up and do it again.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
so,
there's a quote that I highlighted, Matt, from Lovecraft Country, where Atticus, you write about him, for roughly the millionth time in his life, he asked himself, is there any way that I can just ignore this and get on with my day?
Yeah.
And he reflected that it was the minor slights that were the hardest to let pass. After the book is over, he still has to deal with all this crap.
Yeah.
You're right.
The one thing I like is in the beginning of the book.
Pete, I really like your tag, by the way.
Oh, yeah,
For
sorry.
those who are just listening later, Pete, I need to learn to tell time.
This is Pete. Oh, hello, Pete.
Right. At the beginning of the book, Atticus has his travel guide taken away from him.
Yeah.
Which sort of sets the tone for the whole book, because now Atticus can no longer travel safe.
Well, he has to bring his uncle along, who's the publisher of the guide. So he kind of has he has a live replacement for it. But
right, but he doesn't have that travel guide anymore. He has to make do with what he has available, and of course, they're going into Lovecraft Country.
Yeah.
And if you ever needed a safe travel guide,
Yeah.
But obviously that doesn't exist. And the whole structure of the novel sort of relates around that whole idea of we're no longer in a safe zone.
Right.
We've had an encounter. The map of our map of the territory is gone. What we can do is rely on our own wits and friends and family to get through.
Yeah.
Gut instinct about
Yeah.
towns, like the Atticus has. Yeah. Hey, Matt, I got to ask you something. In doing my Matt Ruff research, I came across something called the Matt Ruff non sequitur.
Oh, that's a Neil Stevenson invention. Neil would tease me sometimes. He says, yes, that something is a Matt Ruff non sequitur. And what it is I am one of those people who will.
Oh, did we lose him again?
We lost him again.
Hello?
Yeah, there you
go.
go.
Okay.
Go ahead, Matt. Yeah, I think you hit the mute button or something. I don't know.
No. You froze up for a second. Looks like it's the joys of Xfinity.
Yeah.
I have this tendency to draw connections between things or make leaps of logic that leave out a couple of steps, and then people listening to me are wondering, how did you go from point A to point B? And so that's the Matt Ruff non sequitur. And
isn't that formally like a prigogonic leap?
It might be, but yeah. So anyway, I would do this occasionally, and Neil would rib the crap out of me for it. So,
all right, guys, do we have any more questions about Lovecraft Country before we move on? Kelly?
About Lovecraft Country in particular, or
whatever? It's fine.
Well,
yeah, we can discuss the weather if you'd like. I mean,
no, I wanted to ask, with the success of the book and the acquisition of it for film, does this mean have any of your other books been looked at for some kind of adaptation to film? Like Bad Monkeys sounds like it would make a hilarious film.
Well, Bad Monkeys actually was already under option to Roby's company, Lucky Chap.
Okay.
So, and things tend to move very slowly in Hollywood. So it's still in production. I don't know, when it's actually going to pre-production, but I don't know, when it will be filmed, or even, we'll see. The other, Set This Us in Order my agent loves this, has been optioned for opera by Nico Muley, who is an opera wunderkind from New York. And so he's developing that as an opera. And opera, it's funny, the opera world makes Hollywood seem fast-paced. So Nico's so busy, and the funding process is so long in opera. It may be another 6 or 7 years before anything happens with that. But hopefully before I end up living impoverished in an old folks home somewhere, not knowing my own name, I will get to see the opera version of Set This House in Order.
If you're counting on the opera world for making money, your option of the old folks home looks better. I mean, there's making money in publishing, and then there's making money in opera, and it's like, oh my god.
I have faith in Nico, though. He's quite good.
Is this a retirement home run by Don Coscarelli?
It's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical old folks home for people who think they can make a living solely by writing. So
I just hope I can live in my son's basement, when I'm older. So that's my plan.
Is this opera going to be in the United States, or is he going to take it to Europe?
I think it's going to be in the U.S. Nico's in New York, so I would guess Lincoln Center or somewhere in the city. Although you never know. Hopefully, it will go around the world.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, so Matt, so when I wrote Reanimators, I did it as a fix-up. And Lovecraft Country is done the same way. Was that a conscious decision?
I mean, if you're talking about a short story collection or something like that, I mean, that was the thing. Was the initial concept of the TV series was that it would be kind of, again, kind of like the X-Files, where you'd have your sort of Monster of the Week episodes and then your mythology episodes that sort of connected this idea of Atticus having this weird relationship. He's as you find out in the novel, he is the last living blood descendant of this famous Lovecraftian sorcerer from the 17th century, and the white family members, the white cousins of that sorcerer, have found out about him, and they kind of want to use him in their scheme. So that's sort of like the mythology arc. And so in turning this into a novel, I needed to figure out a way to capture what was good about the TV idea. And one of the things I wanted to definitely keep was the Monster of the Week thing, where I took classic weird tales and reimagined them with African-American protagonists, because I thought that would be a fun thing to do. And then sort of tying that into specific aspects of segregated U.S. So that sort of suggested a short story format. But if you try to pitch a book of short stories, even to a very forgiving publisher, they tend to look at you fish-eyed. So I didn't really want to write a book of short stories. I wanted to write a novel. And so fortunately, Netflix came along while I was thinking about this and sort of invented the idea of binge watching. And then I was like, okay, well, yeah, why don't I do the literary equivalent of a season of television that you will binge read? So it's not short stories, it's episodes. And it actually kind of, even in terms of the length of the pieces, it kind of works out. The opening chapter is about twice as long as the others, so that's your 2-hour pilot. And then there's a chapter along the way about the character Ruby, and that's also 2 hours long, and that's like your Sweeps Week special 2-hour Sweeps Week episode in which amazing things are revealed. So, but yeah, that's the way to think of it. It's not a fix-up. It's like a literary version of a TV show, TV season. But that's how it got that structure that it has.
I have a last question for Lovecraft Country, and then I want to ask you about Mirage. But unless I misread this or am not remembering correctly, it seemed to me that Atticus took magical things and supernatural things in stride, like he sort of expected it. Is he living in a world, a reality, an Earth reality where it's kind of known that there are supernatural things, or he just didn't seem too surprised when this stuff happens?
I mean, to me, that was a combination of two things. One, just that he's a nerd, so he knows the rules. But also, I just figured, being black, he would have had to put up with so much outrageous crap, and he doesn't really have time to think about the practicality of it, or does this stuff make sense? It's like, I've got to react and just deal with it. And so it wasn't so much that most people believe in magic. It was just that whether Atticus believes it or not, he's got to deal with it, and that's what he's sort of trained himself to do. And also, I just generally feel, for making the stuff more believable in fiction, it's to deal with it matter of factly is a better way to go than to have people stop and go, oh my goodness, there's monsters, they're real. Unless you have a reason to draw attention to it that way, I tend to not do that. I just tend to take it in stride.
So the Mirage, I mean, what an interesting premise. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, that was actually, this was yet another pitch at that unsuccessful TV series thing. And the Mirage was my attempt to write a 9/11 novel that was not like other 9/11 novels. And basically, it's set in an alternate universe where the U.S. and the Arab states have essentially changed places. So the world's last superpower is the United Arab States, which has its capital in Riyadh and its economic center in Baghdad, and Iraq is an actual state, not like not a country, but one of the United Arab States. And what we think of as the U.S. is actually a collection of fractured third world countries. And so one day on November 9th, 2001, 11/9, Christian fundamentalists from the Republic of Texas hijack 4 airplanes, and they fly 2 of them into the Tigris and Euphrates World Trade Towers in downtown Baghdad, and 1 into the Ministry of Defense in Riyadh, and then the 4th plane that's headed for the presidential palace in Riyadh gets brought down by its passengers in the desert. And the UAS declares a war on terror and invades the eastern seaboard of the U.S. and sets up a green zone in Washington, D.C., and tries to bring democracy to the Americans. And that goes about as well as you would expect. And so the story picks up some years later. The war is still going on. I guess it was, in the book, it's set in around 2006, 2007. And the main characters are a group of agents for Arab Homeland Security working in Baghdad, and they capture a would-be suicide bomber, a Christian suicide bomber, and he tells them this really weird story that the world they're living in is a mirage, and that in the real world, it's the U.S. that is the superpower, and the Arab states that are the third world countries. And at first, they think he's just pretending to be crazy to sort of somehow, get out of being punished. But when they search his apartment, they find a copy of the New York Times that appears to come from this alternate reality that the guy is talking about. And then they find out that other captured terrorists have been telling the same story, and other artifacts have been found. And
wow,
and certain people in the Arab government have apparently been trying to cover this up, including this war hero, Senator Osama bin Laden. And so it's the story of this group of ordinary Arabs from Iraq who find themselves caught between a bunch of pissed off American bombers and on the one hand, and Osama bin Laden on the other hand, and Saddam Hussein is also in the story. In this reality, he is a gangster. He's sort of the mob, the John Gotti or the Al Capone of Baghdad, and he's involved in this as well. And so that's the story. And I know it superficially sounds a lot like The Man in the High Castle, but I think the main difference for me was that it doesn't just flip the geopolitical situation, it also flips the notion of who matters. All of the main characters in the book are Arabs, Arab Muslims, and the Americans are sort of like the third world sort of cannon fodder guys on the fringes, whereas the main good guys and the main bad guys are Arabs because they're the ones who count. And whereas The Man in the High Castle, particularly Dick's novel, it's much more, the Americans are still the center of the universe. It's just their fortunes have changed. And I wanted to see what happened if he changed everything and just turned even the concept of who mattered as a human being, whose fate counted, upside down, and where that would go. So it actually is more like, I think, Robert Harris's Fatherland in terms of its themes and its sense of the way things go. If you're familiar with that book,
that is a great book. I think
this sounds fascinating. I got to pick this up, Pete.
Yeah, I think
this was another one I thought would make a great TV show, and but of course I'm pitching this in while the Iraq War is still going on, and they were like, well, yeah, we said we wanted something edgy and out there from you, but this is a little too out there. So and even now, this is the book I would really love to see made into a series. I think even now it could be really interesting to see, but even now it may still be a little too radioactive for American television. So. But we'll see if Lovecraft Country does well enough.
Robert Harris's Fatherland is one of the books I keep on my shelf. It's an amazing piece of alt history. I think there's a sequel coming out like next year.
Oh, is there? That's interesting.
I love the idea that in Fatherland, where Nazi Germany is trying to normalize relations with the United States and has to sort of purge its own history.
I mean, and another way to look about the difference between that and Man in the High Castle, it's like Man in the High Castle is what would it have done to America if we'd lost World War II? And Fatherland asks a much more interesting question: is what would it have done to the Germans if they had won World War II?
Right.
Which to me is like, yeah, exactly.
Right. Because one of the underlying themes of that is that, okay, once you've won, and you have to take your spot on the stage of nations.
Are we the bad guys?
Yeah. Oh, damn! Did we do that? Well, let's just kill everybody that can prove that we did that.
Yeah.
And hopefully no one will remember that we did this.
Matt, did you get any, what do I want to say, flack or people that were touchy about this in reviews or anything like that? Or did people just take it in stride? I mean, I can see how it might be a touchy subject in versing this, for some people anyway. I'm
sorry, I missed the first part of that. You guys cut out again.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think your internet connection likes us.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you got any flack, for lack of a better word, from reviewers or Amazon reviewers or anything. I can see how this might, for some people, be a touchy subject. I don't think it is. I think it's very interesting. But
I have to say no. The interesting thing about the sad thing about the Mirage is that it got very little notice whatsoever. I mean, the hardcore Matt Ruff fans read it, and the response was pretty positive. But I think by the time the book was published in 2012, this was a case of my timing being very bad. That I think people were just sick of the war and sick of 9/11, and maybe just didn't want another take on it or whatever. So the New York Times book review, the guy just wasn't into it at all. So it was just sort of a very lukewarm review. So it just didn't get a lot of notice. So I didn't get flack. Flack might actually have spread the word more, but I that was the other thing. I didn't want the book to be successful by pissing people off. I wanted it, if it was going to be successful, by intriguing people and making them think. But I think the timing was just, by the time it came out, people had, war on terror fatigue maybe. So
yeah. Well, I'm going to pick it up, and if I know my listeners, they're writing it down right now somewhere.
I mean, I think it's one of my best pieces of work. So I'm really rather disappointed that it didn't get more attention. But yeah, it's still available. So
all right, well, yeah, The Mirage by Matt Ruff, guys, pick it up. What an intriguing premise. Matt, what are some of the biggest influences on your writing?
Gosh, well, I mean, as you can tell from Lovecraft Country, I mean, I was just sort of the overall general nerd culture growing up. I was a member of the Church of Stephen King for many years. I'm a big Shirley Jackson fan. I'm a big fan of John Crowley. I wish more people were fans of John Crowley.
What's your favorite book by John Crowley? I still think The Deep is just so magnificent. I don't have words for it.
It's that's a gorgeous book. I'm probably partial to The Translator, and also Great Work of Time. The novella Great Work of Time is really good. I mean, Little Big obviously is his most successful and best known tale, and I have quite a warm spot in my heart for that. And Egypt, for many years, I mean, just waiting to see if he would finish that series, the Egypt series, and that sort of summarizes for me everything about John. I mean, it's an amazing set of books, but at the same time, it's almost impossible to describe, and it's definitely not for everybody. I mean, it's one of those fascinating things. But you tell people, what's it about? Well, a guy moves to the country and from the city, and a woman gets a divorce, and oh yes, it's about the nature of dual reality and history and Gnosticism. And you tell people that, and their eyes kind of glaze over, and you're like, but no, it's really good and it's really interesting, but you just sort of have to get caught up in its spell. So yeah. So, but I think of the stuff that's accessible to a larger number of people, I would probably recommend The Translator and Great Work of Time.
What are you reading right now, or what have you read lately that you enjoyed?
I just finished a book by Josh Mallerman called Inspection. It's not out yet. It's I guess it's coming out next year sometime. And it's about this boys' boarding school in the middle of a pine woods, and these kids have been raised there since birth. It's 26 boys. Their names are letters A through Z, and it's an all-male faculty and staff, and they're being raised there, and they're reading. They're reading boys' adventures that are written by this guy who lives on site, and they're forbidden to go into the outer world. And so, of course, and now they're of an age where they're starting to get curious what's out beyond the pines, and the story is about that and how they start to break out of their world and disobey, and what happens as a result. So that was a really interesting, creepy story. And on my to-read pile, I've got Ruthanna Emrys's Wintertide, which is another Lovecraft reimagining. I think it's a take on The Shadow over Innsmouth. And because I've been procrastinating in my writing lately and thinking about projects I want to do, I got a book called The Savage Garden by Peter D'Amato, which is about cultivating carnivorous plants. So when I get some more of my HBO money, I think I'm going to plant a carnivorous garden in the front of the house and see if I can make it work.
I just bought 5 pitcher plants.
You did? It's a trend. There you go.
Well, they eat. But no, some guy at my office grows them, and they're beautiful. And we just cleared out the garden in the back, and I was looking for something interesting to put in there. So, yeah, pitcher plants.
Yeah, and then on as far as TV, my wife and I have been binge watching Orphan Black. We had watched the first couple of seasons when they were first aired, and then we kind of lost track, and so now we've gone back and we're watching the whole thing in order. And that's another case of something which I feel like I know she eventually won an Emmy for her acting, Tatiana Maslany, but I kind of feel like that series should have been bigger than it was when it was on. Because it's just amazing. If you haven't seen it, it's a story about this group of women who are all clones of one another and all find one another, and their sort of struggles to come to terms with what that means and who created them. And it's this one actress doing all the roles, and it's amazing the job she does making each of the characters different. And as they periodically do pretend to be one another, she's good enough that you can tell, okay, that's not really Allison. That is Sarah pretending to be Allison. And so it's just an amazing.
That takes amazing acting skill.
Yeah. I mean, she apparently did improv comedy for like 10 years, which I'm sure is very helpful in creating that level of characterization. But it's just an amazing thing to watch.
Well,
so
speaking of TV, I read also about you that I don't know how recently this was, but you watched the Nightmare documentary on Netflix.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been thinking of watching that. Did you recommend that?
Oh, yeah. That's it's a documentary about night terrors, and basically just people who have sleep paralysis, where they go into that state where your body.
Oh, there he goes again. His internet connection really doesn't like us.
Where is he?
I believe he is in Seattle.
Yeah.
So close to you, Kelly.
So I'm sorry. I lost you guys again. Yeah. So
That's all
right. It's a really interesting thing, but it's also just really scary, the recreations they do of the night terrors to give you a sense of what it's like and how difficult it must be. Well,
it's good because my son and I are always looking for scary shows to scare my wife with. So
yeah,
we'll give that one a try. Does anyone else have questions for Matt before we let him go? Matt Carpenter?
Yeah, just what's next in the publication pipeline? I mean, you've got this. You have to deliver this novel, but do you have anything that's going to kind of be in press that's already completed?
Not my next book. I'm still not ready to talk about, but it's due in 2 months, so it'll probably be out late next year sometime. And the title is 88 Names, and that's all I want to say about it at the moment. But it's I'm hoping it will still appeal to the same people who like Lovecraft Country, but like all Matt Ruff novels, it's kind of different from what I've done before. So we'll see.
Well, Matt, thanks for being on the show. I enjoy Lovecraft Country. I'm gonna pick up your other books. I think I'm gonna start with The Mirage because that sounds so interesting, and go from there. So.
Well, thank you very much for having me, guys. This was fun, and yeah, sorry about the in and out technical stuff, but
No, it happens.
That's par for the course.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad
Matt,
you made it, Pete.
I told you before when we did the video test, you're welcome to stay while we talk about other nerd stuff, or you're welcome to leave right now too if you got something else going on. So it's up to you.
I've actually got some stuff I need to take care of this afternoon, so I am gonna leave you. But yeah, but thanks again for having me. This was fun.
Thanks for being on.
Nice talking to you.
Great talking with you.
Great talking
Thanks,
to you, Matt.
Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Okay, take it easy, guys.
You too. Halloween grabs one of the biggest horror openings ever, aka Mike Myers Kills at the box office. What'd you think, Kelly? You saw it, right?
Yeah, I saw it. I don't even know that I have a right to be disappointed by it because it's still the best Halloween movie in the series in the last 25 years or something like that. But I thought it had a really weak third act, and I was disappointed. I guess the hype machine got to me, and I was expecting something a little more than what we got.
Okay.
Jamie Lee is fantastic, but, you know, she's always fantastic, so that was no surprise.
She was a little weak in Terror Train, but, you know.
I'll let it go since that was, what, 79?
No, so it's funny because I went to see Halloween in the theaters a couple weekends ago, the original. And, you know, afterwards we were talking about it and they're like, oh, that's Jamie Lee Curtis's first movie. It was like introducing Jamie Lee Curtis. And I'm like, seriously? You're going to go with that? Because, like, she's Hollywood royalty. It's not like she wasn't going to have acting chops.
She was on a TV series before that.
Yes. It's not like, you know, John Carpenter found her on the side of the road and, you know, discovered her ability to act. It was there. You know, it's, you know, and one of the, you know, and they found out that Janet Leigh was her mom. And it's like, oh my God, we got our cast her in this movie. Because, like, half the movie is psycho gags.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Here's what I'll say. I'm super, super happy that it made so much at the box office because successful R-rated horror films means more R-rated horror films.
Yeah.
And that's good for me.
Yeah.
Ben Handelman, I haven't seen it, but Ben Handelman told me that Daredevil season 3 is the best superhero season ever.
I'm only 2 episodes in.
I'm only
We're
one.
not going to discuss it with spoilers, but
I've seen it all, and he's right.
Wow.
that's pretty high praise. I got to see it.
Yeah.
So.
I will say that Vincent D'Onofrio is killing it. You know,
Oh, he's back in season 3.
Yeah, he's actually he's really great in this role.
yeah.
I mean, he
Well,
makes
I've only seen season 1, and yeah, he was great.
You know, it's funny because he kind of reminds me of like Macbeth or Hamlet. He's like the king. He's like, you know, he doesn't say much, but when he opens his mouth, he says something poignant and telling that sets the tone for the rest of the episode.
You know, I just want to say, if you really don't need to see season 2, all you know is that the only connection is the beginning ties into the Defenders, but there's not much blowback from the Defenders. They really go back to season 1 to tie up a lot of loose ends.
So I don't really need to see season 2.
You could follow this. It's just that it opens up at the end of Defenders where Matt was in a very bad place. But it doesn't. But it deals exclusively with the Kingpin. It doesn't really go into all those partners he had who ended up in season 2. You don't get much Punisher. There's just some brief references to Elektra from season 2, and that's about it.
Well, I know I'm not saying it was awful or anything, but I did try watching season 2, and I didn't like it as much as I like season 1. So if I can skip season 2 and go directly to season 3, that'd be great.
You won't miss much. There was just a confrontation between Matt and the Kingpin briefly in season 2, which has some blowback in this, but there's not much continuity with it ties in a lot to season 1.
Okay.
Like you get, we had a lot of questions raised about Karen. Well, we get the answers in this season.
And at the same time, Iron Fist and Luke Cage are canceled. So
I have thoughts.
You have thoughts?
Well, so we had talked a little bit beforehand, and we do know that Disney is starting their own streaming service. Disney owns Marvel, and it could just be that they're going to be porting stuff over to their own streaming service. Right. I'm not exactly sure what the deal is that they're making for their Netflix shows. But the other thing is that it could be that they are, they hinted at the Heroes for Hire idea in that second season of Luke Cage, and it could just be that they're going to consolidate both of these characters into one show and turn it into the Power Man Iron Fist Hour or something like that.
Yeah, and they also set it up for Daughters of the Dragon.
Right.
So,
and
which would fit as a secondary storyline through any Heroes for Hire episode.
Right. It's funny because if you go back in time and look at the comics followed this sort of same pattern where they got really, really big and then they got canceled, and then people got excited and they brought them back and they got canceled.
Well, Iron Fist was a failure to begin with. It lasted only like 6 or 12 issues, something like that.
Right.
And they brought him in with Luke Cage right away.
Yep. Yeah. So it's not unusual to see it this way.
It's just that we had both the second season of each series ended with some unresolved questions.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like when the show Deadwood ended, and it ended in the worst possible time that you could end this series. They just dropped the bottom out of it. And so now I'm thinking Luke Cage ended up in a place where I thought he was turning really darker, and I thought it'll be interesting to see how they handle this in season 3.
Yeah.
Plus the music from Luke Cage is like out of this world great, and I'm
amazing.
I want more.
Well, I just want to say I had the same issue when Agent Carter got canceled. It would be nice if they do what they used to do in the comic books, is if you cancel the series and they had an ongoing storyline, you would try to write a resolution in another comic. So just like I was always hoping that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would have a flashback to, like a 1-episode flashback to Agent Carter and just resolve all that issues that were there at the last episode. And you could do something like that if they don't end up in Heroes for Hire, or, you can have them pop up in Daredevil or something.
Well, and now that we've established that Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is fine with time travel, maybe we get somebody going back and actually interacting with Agent Carter.
It is. I'm way behind on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah, so, you're not. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. My nerd card is revoked. And now...
We know you're a DC guy, so...
Yes, yeah. I do have DC Universe. I am watching Titans. But now it's time for the fight of the millennium, or the day. Upgrade versus Venom. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, so you guys were heaping praise on Venom last week, and I then went and watched it, and I was like, okay, A, this movie is a
It was a
turd,
fun movie.
and B, it's amazingly similar to the movie Upgrade, which came out 6 months ago, and so I wanted you, Mike, to watch Upgrade and tell me if you thought that it was a uncomfortably similar storyline.
It is similar. It's a good movie. It's not as fun as Venom. I liked when you found out who was really behind the murder of his wife and what happened to him. No spoilers or anything.
No,
That was nice. I really like that.
I just thought it was interesting. I mean, here's the movies start out the same way, with the lead characters being told, you're going to go interview this Elon Musk kind of person, and then the introduction of this thing that changes their life as far as the stem or the venom suit. And then the scene in the kitchen it looked like it was almost the exact same scene to me, and I thought, somebody's ripping off somebody here. And since the Venom storyline, his origin is so completely different than what they portrayed in the movie, I had to feel like they were ripping off from Upgrade.
It very well could be. I'm not going to say no. It very well could be. They are very similar in some ways.
I know
they're different in the mood.
Upgrade. I don't know if he's seen Venom.
But I just want to say there've been incredible coincidences where you would think that somebody had seen the other thing.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that even, every year there seems to be two big budget movies that have the exact same premise, volcanoes or asteroids or something like that. And I don't have a problem with that. I just thought that this was, when those premises come out, you don't see scenes that seem exactly like the scene in both movies. And it was a little weird to me. And I thought that Upgrade was far, far superior just as a film. I thought it might not have been as much fun, but I thought it had a lot of very dark humor in it.
Well, in the old comic books, Marvel and DC seemed a lot of times to be spying on each other, because you would get like Deathstroke and Deadpool coming out close together, Swamp Thing and Man Thing.
Yeah.
And it had to be that somebody knew the other side was creating a character like this.
Right.
Well, if I was going to watch one of the movies again, which I'm not, it would probably be Venom, because I think it's more fun. But
Wow.
Upgrade, that said, Kelly, you're not wrong. Upgrade is a good movie. It's a very good movie, I think. And I really liked, as I said, there was a resolution there that I didn't see coming. And that's always a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. I thought that Tom Hardy was horribly miscast in Venom. I felt like he was in a completely different movie than everybody else. Michelle Williams, I thought, was awful, but only because she was given zero to do. And she was Tom Hardy
voiced Venom too, right?
I did not know that. That's cool. And I thought, given the Venom character and put into the Upgrade storyline, I think would have made a better movie than both of those movies. I think there's one good movie with the two of these movies. But I thought the effects of Venom looked so 1994 that I was quite honestly shocked. It looked like I was watching a cartoon character interacting with humans, and it just was like, Jesus, these are bad effects.
I thought this is a 90s movie that just got made, which is not a bad thing, really. But
yeah, it kind of reminds me of Ang Lee's Hulk.
Yeah,
where the CGI was just so bad.
Yeah.
Well, my complaint is I wish the guys at Sony would stop putting the ending of movies into the trailers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because the best, it has a great scene in the end. It's not exactly the last scene. And you got that almost totally in the trailer.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a movie that came out, I think, in 2000, called What Lies Beneath with Harrison Ford and Michelle Pfeiffer. One of the trailers gives the whole thing away. It's almost as surprising as the Sixth Sense thing, and they give it away in the trailer.
Yeah.
And I was very happy I didn't see that particular trailer before I watched the movie. So I don't know what these guys are thinking, giving away spoilers, but.
So with all of that being said, all the horrible things I just said about Venom, I watched it, and I did, as it was happening, I was thinking, I kind of like this movie, even though I was having all these problems with it. So there's something there for it. I wish they would have taken advantage. I'm not sure why it was a PG-13 movie. They took out any kind of tie to Spider-Man, and so I was like, why not go with Deadpool or Logan and make this an R-rated superhero film? This is a very dark character, anti-hero that Venom is, and he kills people, and we see off screen him chomp a couple of heads and things like that. And the whole time
I hadn't thought about that, Kelly. That's a really good point. They could have gone the Deadpool route where he's in the same universe, and he'll allude to him, but maybe he doesn't think much of Spider-Man, that kind of thing, like Deadpool.
Well, he shouldn't. He's Spider-Man's, arch enemy at this point.
Well, you know what I mean, sarcastic remarks or something like that. That would have been fun.
I felt very much like this was just a money grab on Sony's part. They know that Sony has, that Spider-Man has gone over to Marvel, and so what they're doing is, hey, Marvel's probably going to do something with Venom now in a Marvel Sony movie, so let's get our own Venom movie out real quick, make a couple of bucks.
No. Well, if they do a Spider-Man versus Venom movie, they're going to have to use Tom Hardy at this point.
I don't believe so. I think they will wipe it clean, and I think that's why there was no mention of Spider-Man in the Venom movie.
No, I don't. I doubt it. This movie successful. Hardy hit the nail. It would save. I'll tell you this. It would save a lot of. You already have Venom established as a character. You get him right going with Spider-Man. You just have to add a scene where he switches hosts for a while.
So more than a year ago, when it was announced that Spider-Man was going to be joining into the Avengers, Infinity War film, they were doing this announcement, and the Sony exec and the Disney exec were there at the table talking, and they were all very excited. And then the Sony exec says, and yes, this means our Venom movie is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And the other executive was just like, it was clear that they had not discussed that at all. They're being very selective about bringing in Spider-Man, and that Venom was not on the table.
But I bet you there are discussions now for Spider-Man versus Venom was the success of this movie.
Well, okay. I guess we've knocked that out.
I won.
We'll let you think that. Okay. Here at Screen Rant, I wanted to get into this last week, but we ran out of time. Every upcoming Stephen King movie in development. So
no.
I know Kelly's interested.
I just assume that's every single thing King has written.
Yeah.
My God, this is a lot of stuff here. I'll just name them quickly. We don't have to discuss each one. Pet Sematary, It Chapter 2, Dr. Sleep. Of course, they can't put all this in one page. I got to click something. Oh my God, the Tommyknockers? You got to be kidding me. The Talisman. Revival. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that'd be good.
That's a damn good Lovecraftian book.
The problem with a lot of these, like Tommyknockers and Revival, are Josh Boone projects.
Development hell.
Yeah. So I don't think they are going to be getting made anytime soon. His New Mutants movie just got pushed back 6 months.
What's the point of remaking Pet Sematary? It's
Money.
one of the scariest freaking films I've ever seen.
Oh,
Cha-ching.
Pete, it's awful. Maybe watch it
Cha-ching.
again. That's a turd of a movie. Also,
Is
that
it?
movie is.
I mean, I know Tommy Knockers sucked, but
It's from the money. That's why they're doing it. Stop thinking of an artistic motive here.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, so
I'm just gonna go
I
cry in
don't
the corner
understand
now.
like Pet
And
Sematary.
I liked both versions of Salem's Lot, but I didn't see any really dying need to remake Salem's Lot.
Right. Yeah. So you don't like Pet Cemetery. You're disagreeing with Pete on this, Kelly, right?
Well, I thought it was fine, and I watched it recently, and I was like, wow. Except for why can't I think of his name? Herman Munster.
Fred Gwynn.
Fred Gwynn. Except for him turning in a spectacular performance. Dale Midkiff is stiff as a board. The kids are really bad actors. Denise Crosby is trying her best. She's probably the best actor in the movie, but she's not given a lot to do except for run and cry.
Denise Crosby? That was Denise Crosby, like from Star Trek?
Yeah, she was the wife.
Yeah.
And so I thought that it really, really missed.
Oh, come on. The cat turns out the cat should have won an Academy fucking award.
Well, the cat in the trailers we've seen actually looks like the cat on the cover. Everything looks really creepy in this movie. Now, I don't know if it will be or not, but I'm all for it if they can make a better version of it.
Lissy's Story, Suffer the Little Children, Hearts in Atlantis. They're redoing Salem's Lot. Rose Matter. I don't know what Drunken Fireworks is.
They're redoing Hearts in Atlantis, too.
Well, the Hearts in Atlantis movie that came out is actually based on a story called Low Men in Yellow Coats or something like that. But it's from the book Hearts in Atlantis, and they took that for the title.
Firestarter is on this list. Wouldn't this be the third Firestarter movie, or am I wrong?
I think it's only two.
Yeah, I think there was Firestarter and there was Firestarter 2.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
there was a sequel.
And then there was Carrie, and then Carrie was remade with Chloe Metz. And then there was Carrie 2, The Resurrection.
And there was a Carrie television movie.
Yeah.
Okay, these next two are interesting. And I hope they get made. The Jaunt. You remember that short story, guys?
Yeah, that's a great Lovecraftian teleportation story.
Yeah, I don't know how you make that into a movie.
Not a feature length, yeah.
But yeah,
Look,
I just a great story. I don't know how you make it into a movie.
Also, pretty bleak ending on that one.
Yeah. And last but not least, The Stand.
Oh, come on.
Also, never going to happen.
You don't think so?
Be another mini series. You can't make a 2-hour, 3-hour movie of that.
Yeah, and we are in the era of the miniseries.
well,
And binge watching. They should not make a movie out of this.
yeah, it should not be let's binge it. Make it 10 episodes.
Right.
Look, I watched and finished The Terror. And that is the way to do a book like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And, thankfully, I did not have to break it up every week. I got all 3 discs at the same time. 3, 4 discs, I can't remember. And I watched it in a weekend because it sucked me in. And
Disc?
that's the way to do it.
Discs? How
Discs.
2,000 of you?
Yes, I know. I still get discs. You and my wife have been berating me about this. Right.
I'm not berating you.
It's just the way I was an early subscriber to Netflix, so I am grandfathered into their old way of doing things. And if I were to terminate my account and just go to something else, it would cost me $20 to $30 more.
Mm.
So I just stick with it, and I got 4 options on my instant, and I get 2 movies at a time.
Frozen Hell. You guys told me about this before we started the show. John W. Campbell's expanded version of Who Goes There. Who wants to talk about this? Explain this, I mean.
Oh, I can.
Okay, go ahead.
So some researcher, so there's the story Who Goes There by John W. Campbell, which was turned into The Thing from Another World, the Howard Hawks movie, and then John Carpenter's It. I'm sorry, John Carpenter's The Thing. And then, there was the prequel as well that it inspired. Some researcher was doing this thing where he was putting together Campbell's letters and found several references to Frozen Hell. And didn't think it was still extant, and eventually found a reference to papers being donated to, I think it was Harvard, and called up Harvard and asked to see the donation. And sure enough, there is a book-length version of the thing from Another World, Who Goes There, called Frozen Hell. And I guess Wildside Press is going to put it out.
Is it out now on Amazon?
I'm sorry. Wait.
No, it is.
It's a Kickstarter right now.
Wildside Press.
Yes.
Yeah.
John Gregory Betancourt is John Campbell's executor.
Oh, so this is on a Kickstarter.
Well, sort of.
It's
here. I'm on the Kickstarter. I've kicked in.
Yeah, it's a Kickstarter, but I think that's just one way to gain attention to the book.
Ah, okay.
It's more like it's almost a pre-order Kindle.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
so they've got 40 days to go. They've hit 21,000, which means they've gained 2,000 since I looked at it just before
I think they were only
today.
looking for $1,000.
$1,000. So
Yeah.
this has opened it up. The stretch goals that it opened up was a new cover by Bob Eggleton. And now he is also creating a set of original interior illustrations for it. That was one of the stretch goals they unlocked.
And I think Betancourt has written a prequel story that is going to be partially included in the book.
Okay, I can't imagine anyone listening doesn't know this, but just in case, of course, this was the inspiration for The Thing. Another point, I don't remember where it is. Google it if you're interested. I am, because I love audio dramas. There was an audio drama made of Who Goes There. Oh, wait a minute. I actually have a link to it on the audios page at the Lovecraftian website. So try there if it's not out of date. I got to check over that page soon.
Was that Suspense who did that?
I don't think so, no, but I don't remember who.
And then, if you want, it's been my belief, and when I wrote Weird Company, which riffs off of Who Goes There, it's my belief that Campbell wrote that as a kind of sequel to At the Mountains of Madness.
Okay.
And also sort of as an in-joke on Doc Savage and the Avenger.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, he's got a character called the Man of Bronze, and he's got a character called the Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And the Avenger was a Man of Steel before Superman, in
Right.
one sense.
I should have mentioned this when we were talking about Halloween, but for those interested, I found out actually right before the show, I haven't seen it yet, that there is a short film on YouTube called He Came Home, and it's getting a lot of attention. So I'm assuming it's good. So just go to YouTube and search for He Came Home if you're interested in watching it. It's 8 minutes and change long. So
Talking to you, Benjamin Handelman, since he said last week that Halloween was his favorite movie of all time.
oh well, yes, go Ben, check it out.
Yeah.
What are you guys watching and reading for Halloween or whatever? You guys watching anything in particular or reading anything particularly get you in the Halloween mood?
So the funny thing is that, I told you I saw Halloween a couple weeks ago, and then Ben says it's his favorite movie. I wanted to sit down and write down my complaints about the movie, so I've actually put it at the top of my queue to watch this week, even though I've just seen it. But this time I want to watch it and take notes, because I think there's some real problems with the film. What I'm reading is by Brandon Barrows. This Rough Old World. It's a Lovecraftian crime noir set in the 60s.
That looks cool.
Yeah, I think it's a riff on the Charlie Manson gig, but I haven't finished it yet. I got about 50 pages left. So, but it's really well written. It's a little convoluted, but that's kind of what I expect from a noir. So it's very good.
Anyone else?
Well, I just watched on Netflix a foreign film called Errementary, Erremantari, something like that. And I thought it was spectacular. And Mike, I think you would love it. It's about a blacksmith. It's a period piece. It's about a blacksmith who has captured a demon, and the effects are fantastic. It's got some humor in it. It's really, really neat. Okay,
that does sound interesting. Can you spell it again?
Oh boy, I don't think I spelled it right the first time.
But it starts with an E, right?
Yeah, E-R. It's like the word elementary, only it's Errementary. Errementari, I believe.
Okay, and then just one more question. How do you spell elementary?
That's English, right? I've never learned how to spell English, so. Then I also watched this cool little movie that's going to be available on October 31st. It is called The Emperor of Dreams, and it's a documentary on the life of Clark Ashton Smith that Hippocampus Press is releasing. Mm-hmm. And it's really good. I'm embarrassingly uninformed about Clark Ashton Smith, and I haven't read a lot of his stuff, and this really made me want to get into it more. And it's just full of a lot of the people that we know and love. Cody Goodfellow and Harlan Ellison, and all these people are talking about Clark and his life. And I thought it was a really, really neat documentary. I missed it at the Lovecraft Film Festival, and I told Derek that I didn't get a chance to see it. And so he sent me a copy, and I got to say, I think you guys would all love it.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're going to
The Emperor of Dreams.
You could try the collection from Arkham House, Rendezvous in Avalon.
Okay.
That's how I got started on Clark Ashton Smith. It's a really lovely collection of most of his best fiction. It doesn't go into his poetry. There's a recent book from Centipede Press about his artwork, which is probably unavailable anymore, unfortunately.
Right. I don't want to spend $100 on a book right now. So.
I think
serious question. In this documentary, is this Cody Goodfellow with beard or without beard?
It is with beard.
Okay. All right.
The Darkest Timeline, Cody.
I think the complete Clark Ashton Smith is still available from Nightshade in like 6 volumes.
Okay, cool.
So I suppose you can go to the Hippocampus website and get the Emperor of Dreams.
But if you want to save yourself some money, almost all of Clark Ashton Smith's stories and poetry is online at the Eldritch Dark website.
This movie made me think, why don't I have some Clark Ashton Smith in my actual physical library? So
yeah, I mean, Creatures of the Night, is that the one I'm thinking of, Rick?
Monsters in the Night.
Monsters in the Night. It is so. Everyone talks about Clark Ashton Smith being flowery and this great mastery of language, but he also has some really, really great tight stories that are just simple language, straightforward stories, like ripped right out of like Asimov's or Analog or something like that. Just really good tight stories.
I can't wait to dig in.
Anyone else got some Halloween reads going on or watches?
Yeah, I'm reading again A Night in the Lonesome October.
Oh yeah, you can't reread that book too many times. It's so magical.
I watched something last weekend called The Apostle.
Yeah, my mom. I've got I got a bunch of followers emailing me and Facebook messaging me saying this is an absolutely great movie. My mom watched it and she's like, "Well, that was a piece of crap" or something similar. So I don't know which way to go. What did you think, Pete?
I thought it had some interesting ideas. I think it's a little packed.
Is it Lovecraftian? I'll take that as a no.
I don't think so.
Okay. Is it good?
I think it's better than the average horror movie. I think it borrows heavily from movies like The Wicker Man.
Right.
It's a very folksy kind of horror. But I think it's a little long. It could have been tightened up in some places. I think you could cut it in half and you still would have made a decent movie.
Okay.
I am rewatching. I found on YouTube this miniseries, a British miniseries from I think around 1973, called Jack the Ripper, which the premise was they took these two popular detectives called Barlow and Watt from British television. Sort of, we took like Columbus and Kojak, Columbo and Kojak. And they reopened the Jack the Ripper case. It's sort of like a docudrama. It goes through the whole murders, how many murders there were, how they have all the forensic evidence. It was influenced every Jack the Ripper movie that you saw afterwards. So if you've seen Murder by Decree, or you've seen Jack the Ripper with Michael Caine, or From Hell, or read the comic book, all that comes from this miniseries. That's where they first mentioned that it's really a ludicrous theory, but it got a lot of publicity that William Gull, the doctor to Queen Victoria, was Jack the Ripper.
I think I saw that when that first came out.
Yeah, I'm surprised it never has been put out on DVD, but it is available on YouTube. You can look up Jack the Ripper, Barlow, Barlow, and Watt, Watt.
Still liking Doctor Who? Second episode?
Yeah, I liked it. They seem to be developing the aliens from the first episode because they gave them a name check. They were responsible for that planet, and there's going to be something weird with the past of Doctor Who, some reference to a timeless child.
That was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to see where they go with that.
Okay. Titans episode 2. Kelly's not here right now, so I thought it was a little slow, but it's very good. The fight scenes are just spectacular. So I'm hanging on. We'll see what happens next. Let's see here. I just read this is nothing to do with Halloween or genre fiction or anything like that, but I really enjoyed it. And I don't read just horror. I don't think any of us do. But it's a novel called The Never Open Desert Diner by, I think his name is James Anderson. And it's funny because I was looking for a story set in the desert. It's just, that kind of appeals to me. The starkness of it, the isolation. And I couldn't find anything on Amazon. This was like a month ago. And then a few days ago, I get an email from Amazon with the daily $1.99 deals on Kindle, and I see this title, The Never Open Desert Diner. So I bought it for $1.99, and it was really, really good. It's about this truck driver. The protagonist is a truck driver that drives back and forth this 100-mile stretch on a Highway 117, and it's really, really isolated. And the characters that live off of 117 and their reasons for kind of hiding away from the world. It's an interesting book. So, and when I was done, I thought, okay, that's it. And then I found out that this is going to be a series. So I ordered book 2. So anyway, that's what I read recently. Finished it yesterday, I think. Did you like you're back, Kelly? Did you like season 2 or episode 2 of Titans?
Oh, I haven't had a chance to get over and see it yet. You tell me, am I going to like it?
It's a little slow, but as it was in the first episode, the fight scenes are spectacular. I think it was setting up a lot of things, and hopefully episode 3 won't be as slow.
I saw that it had the characters Hawk and Dove in it, which are way back before the new Teen Titans when they were just the Teen Titans. So I'm curious how they're going to show them.
And interestingly, the guy who plays Hawk is the guy who played Aquaman in Smallville. So.
Oh, you're kidding me. Okay. All right.
I kept thinking that voice is familiar. And then he takes his mask off, and I thought that face is familiar. And then it hit me. So.
Nice.
I wonder if they're ever going to do the Monarch storyline then. You know, where
You just spoiled the whole story.
Well, I'm just going to mention Monarch. If they have Hawk, I'm wondering if they have Monarch.
You didn't spoil anything for me because I don't know what you're talking about. So.
Yeah, I don't think that was a spoiler. The only people who would understand what you're talking about is anybody who's read.
For the real geeky comic book fan.
Right. So.
All right. I don't know if you guys care about this. I do. Netflix to create new series and films based on the Chronicles of Narnia. Series and films. I hope what they mean is series.
Okay, if they're going to do that, if it's going to be on Netflix, we want full frontal Saturn nudity.
I'm not sure that that's what we want.
Yeah.
Otherwise, why even bother?
I'm not embarrassed to admit it. I like the Chronicles of Narnia. So.
Well, when they put out the movies, I think most people wanted to watch those because they never saw a Minotaur battle a centaur before.
Yeah.
I thought that first Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe movie was pretty good. Did they continue the series after that?
There was at least one other one, and it was like
there was 2 more. There was Prince Caspian, and then there was The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, which I really enjoyed. That was actually one of my favorite books too in the series.
And the movie was really good. I didn't even know they came out.
The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, they did Reepicheep the mouse really well. It didn't seem. It would be very easy to make that absolutely fucking ridiculous, and it wasn't. So.
There had been British television adaptations of most of those books too before that.
The thing is, Kelly, they make them at they were I believe PG, not PG-13, PG.
Well, I think,
and that to me was like it made a lot of the fight scenes a lot less appealing.
Well, it was aimed at kids, right?
Yeah, C.S. Lewis was not writing for adults. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
You know what I'd rather see? I mean, I think this is great. I do love those books. Looking back, as a child, I have no idea if I'd love them as an adult. But if they were going to do that, it'd be nice to give stuff a chance that hasn't been made yet. I'd love to see, I don't remember the writer, but the Book of Three and the Black Cauldron and the Horned King.
Lloyd Alexander,
thank you. I'd like to see those made into a series. Or do you guys ever read the Borables?
Yeah, they were sort of proto borrowers.
Yeah, a little bit. I'd like to see some series that maybe haven't gotten a chance rather than another set. This is the same thing. Is it Netflix or was it Amazon that's doing the Lord of the Rings now as a series? And kind of like, but I'm not sure.
I thought that it was not going to be the Lord of the Rings per se. It's going to be like parallel stories. or
okay.
prequels or something like that. It
Well,
wasn't going to be.
there's a lot of thing in Tolkien's Silmarillion. Is that the name of the book?
Yeah.
That you could do into a TV series.
Yeah.
It might be like young Aragorn and the Teen Rangers.
Oh, boy.
Ramsey Campbell's latest book, The Way of the Worm, is available at PS Publishing. If you go to the Lovecraft Ezine website, lovecraftezine.com, the latest post is a review by Paul St. John McIntosh, and I've got a link to the book at PS Publishing there as well. So
the problem with ordering from, I'm going to get this book, but I'm going to wait till it comes either to Amazon or Camelot Books or some U.S. distributor, because you pay an arm and a leg for postage if you order it directly from PS Publishing.
that is true, unfortunately.
I ordered it. It just hasn't come in yet. But who's kidding who? Like, I'll get around to reading it anytime.
Well, this is the third in his trilogy.
Right.
I still have the second one on my to be read pile.
I've read the first two; they're excellent.
But I really enjoyed the first one. I haven't read the second one yet.
Rick, you're a good guy. Thank you so much for this Batman book.
You're
I
welcome.
really appreciate it. That was very nice of you to send that. So, well, we got anything else to talk about? I do have other things to talk about, but I'm actually cognizant of the fact that Doctor Who starts in 9 minutes.
Thank you.
And Rick wants to see it.
Yes.
You geeks.
I'll watch it tomorrow morning on Amazon. So
We'll get some social commentary with this episode. It's about Rosa Parks.
oh, that's right. Yeah.
And I'm not going to ruin anything, but I felt there was a lot of subtle political commentary going on in Daredevil.
Okay. Well, who do we have next week? Hang on a second. Next week we have, I'm sorry. Next week is the Halloween show with Jeff and Scott Thomas. That's going to be a blast. Then Mike Carey, then Richard Chismar, Aaron J. French, and moving down past some of these names, we'll talk to Victor LaValle about the Ballad of Black Tom, which interestingly was published on the very same day that Matt Ruff's book was. So, yeah, Rick?
I was just going to say, did anybody ever read a story by David Drake called Curse to Darkness?
Yes.
It's familiar.
It's set in Africa, but it kind of has the same premise as Black Tom, sort of a precursor to it. Black Tom has done much better, I think, but that's just an interesting little tidbit I'll throw in. It's a new Tales of the Cthulhu Mythos by Ramsey Campbell.
It's also in Drake's collection of mythos stories. So.
Yeah.
Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Thanks for your notes. I keep getting notes that people tell me this is one of the highlights of their week. I really do appreciate it. Keeps me going. And it's not just me. These guys, it'd be a pretty boring show if it was just me. And I appreciate you guys being on the show as well.
It's your world, Mike. We just live in it.
I wouldn't go that far. I'd love more Patreons. You do get to listen to more podcasts if you're a Patreon. The minimum is $5 a month, so less than a meal at McDonald's once a month. Just Google Lovecraft Ezine Patreon; it'll take you right to it. So I'd really appreciate that. The Patreons literally keep all these Lovecraft Ezine projects going. And if Patreon disappeared tomorrow, I probably could not continue. So I appreciate you guys. All right. Next week, the Halloween show. You guys are off. I'll make sure you get paid the same rate regardless. And we'll talk to everybody next week. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.